I think they're trying to come to some sort of an agreement. The rumor is that he wants $30 million, and that the UFC's going to pay it. Hopefully, I hope they pay it.
I agree with him.
Imagine what happens to mixed martial arts if Jon Jones beats Tom Aspinall after Tom Aspinall being the guy that everybody thought could beat him. After Tom Aspinall doing what he's done to the heavyweight division. Imagine if he wins. Imagine the position he will find himself in terms of negotiating power then.
As the year begins, the MMA community already seems to be buzzing with exhilarating news, including the highly extravagant and lucrative fight between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, which according to Joe Rogan is the craziest bout he has ever heard of. Meanwhile, after looking at the upcoming calendar of the UFC bouts, there is no doubt that this year will be anything but ordinary because almost every one of these events includes a star-studded cast. However, despite all these announcements, MMA fanatics still yearn for something bigger and more exhilarating. Aware of these incessant public demands, UFC's CEO Dana White recently divulged the future plans regarding the sport, expressing that after the completion of the current projects, they will move on to the fights that the fans want.
Right off the top of my head, I don't know. I know we have our new schedule mapped out until probably February.
Okay.
Everything is sort of a TBD. So what we'll do is we'll lay out 3 different possibilities that we could end up in, on certain dates. And we'll start to narrow that down as we get into the...
During this particular interview, Dana also shared his thoughts on a possible collaboration with the Saudi authorities, particularly His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, for the advancement and revolution of MMA, just like the one that boxing has seen in the last few years, where the process of making huge fights has been simplified, and the benefits of them have been increased tenfold for both the fighters as well as all the organizers and stakeholders that are involved in it, which is unprecedented in a sport like MMA or boxing, which in the past used to be heavily governed by politics and biases.
It's not that I'm changing my mind. It's that I'm looking at a different opportunity. Obviously, the Saudis have, Sheikh Turki specifically has completely reinvigorated boxing, making fights that couldn't be made before, that would have never been made had it not been for him. So he and I have, created a relationship, and it's made me more interested.
Although there have been a lot of varying demands circulating online regarding what fight the fans want to see the most, one bout that outshines them all is the battle between 2 of the greatest heavyweight legends in UFC history, Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. Sharing his plan about orchestrating this, Dana stated that a fight of this caliber is quite crucial at this point for the UFC, because not only is this something that the fans want, but also because of its nature of being a potential heavyweight title unification fight, which at the end of the day brings a lot of attention to the industry in general.
I get asked this every year, and this year it would be Aspinall Jones. That's the biggest fight in heavyweight history, and at the end of the day, what my job is to give the fans what they want, and that's what the fans want.
So obviously you said you want him to fight Tom next, and you said that could just be the biggest heavyweight fight of all time.
It will be.
Oh man, that might be the best fight in MMA.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. People will lose their minds if either one of those fights happen.
Highlighting another major perspective that adds to the significance of this fight, Dana emphasized that even though Jon Jones has reached the pinnacle of his career and can have all the fights that he wants, at this stage it is his due obligation to participate in the fights that are an obligation, like this fight with Aspinall, considering how the English fighter is the interim challenger for the heavyweight titles. Adding on to this, Dana revealed that after looking at the history of Jon's career, it is clear that the reason that he became the youngest heavyweight champion in the history of UFC was that he was given the required opportunities, so it is about time that he bestows the same favor to all the younger fighters, rather than pursuing his own interest, like a fight with the vicious Alex Pereira.
A guy like Jon Jones has had a career that, if he wants something, we would do it, but you can't just want to do a fun fight and not fight the interim heavyweight champion, the guy who's next, because if Jon Jones
retired on Saturday, Tom Aspinall would be the heavyweight champion. So opportunities were given to Jon Jones. He was 23, he was the youngest heavyweight champion of all time. Now, as he sits where he sits, it's his obligation to give it to the younger guy, to give him that opportunity. And if he beats Tom Aspinall, then yes, I would do the Alex Pereira fight.
Moving on, while sharing his thoughts on this potential fight and how it will transpire, it is no surprise that Dana seems to be Team Jones based on the cordial relationship and respect that both these individuals share for each other. Dana, who has been quite vocal about his support of Jones since the beginning of his career as a young fighter, stated that although Tom is a tremendous fighter who deserves the spot that he currently has, when it comes to fighting and skills, there is no one currently in combat sports who can surpass Jon's greatness based on the fact that this 37-year-old fighter has achieved the impossible by being on the top of the game and by doing what has never been done before in the history of the sports.
And then he would go for the head kick and slipping punches. I mean, he's going to be 38 years old this summer. He looked incredible. I just don't know how any of you don't see that this guy's the fucking greatest fighter in the history of people fighting. He's 37 going on 38. And again, tonight, he went in and did what he did. He's fucking unbelievable. And as long as he's active, he's the pound for pound best fighter in the world.
Just like his close friend and ally Dana, prominent UFC commentator and popular podcaster Joe Rogan shared his thoughts on this potential fight, stating how at this stage this fight is a must and should be the main priority for this year, no matter what other fights might be there. Further divulging on this bout, Joe revealed some insider information in a now controversial statement about how, although the fight hasn't been finalized yet, there are alleged rumors about Jon's insane price tag for it, which comes around a whooping $30 million.
I think it's going to be Aspinall. I think they're trying to come to some sort of an agreement. The rumor is that he wants $30 million, and that the UFC's going to pay it.
Joe also shared his analysis of these potential fights and the chances that both the fighters have of winning this thing. Talking about Jones, Joe stated that even though Bones mightn't be a true heavyweight, he is a force to be reckoned with because since the beginning of his career, despite his somewhat smaller size, he has destroyed some of the most well-established heavyweight fighters in the world. And with his extreme power, the fighter also possesses an extreme stamina and ring IQ, which allows him to easily overpower his opponent by not only taking down their defenses, but also by dismantling their every strategy slowly as the fight goes on.
Bet against Jon. It's hard to bet against Jon, but Jon's not a real heavyweight. Yeah. Jon could make light heavyweight, 100%. He weighs 230 right now, maybe a little less than 230. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt in my mind that if Jon just changed his diet and went back, he hasn't put that much mass on that you would say 205 is out of reach.
No, it's fluffy weight.
Yeah.
A lot of it too.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had always had the reputation of all the heavyweights up at Jackson Winklejohn. Top 10 in the world as a heavyweight. I thought it was the shit. He fucked me up. He goes, he beat my ass. And he goes, he beat everybody else's ass too. All the other heavyweights, ragdoll dudes way bigger than him. He's just a freak.
Joe expressed some concerns for Tom, explaining that even though both the fighters are tremendous in their own regard, when it comes to going against a fighter like Jon Jones, there is only so much that you can do, especially if you are a fighter who at this stage in his career has not yet faced any other major adversity. Labeling the American fighter a boogeyman, Joe claimed that Jon is like a demon who is always on top of his game and knows how to be better no matter the odds that might be stacked against him.
A problem for him, right? Because he has not been tested in that way. And you're getting up to elite status where you're calling out Jon Jones.
Yeah.
Right? That's the boogeyman. Like Jon Jones is the boogeyman. And maybe he hasn't died, but he's probably he's probably knocked on the door a couple of times like, what's going on, Death? You in there?
Meanwhile, though Joe might be supporting Jones in this fight, he also commended the young fighter for his unprecedented abilities and speed, which according to the podcaster might be his strongest suit. After analyzing the fights that Tom has participated in the past couple of years, especially the fight with Sergey Pavlovich where Tom won his interim heavyweight title, Joe emphasized that Tom's speed is out of the the world as compared to any other heavyweight fighter, because this is not something you might expect from a guy in this division due to their immense size, but for a fighter like Tom, who has meticulously crafted this skills over the course of his career, this is a part of his game plan when taking on threats like Jon Jones.
I talk about a guy who's fast twitch. Aspinall is one of the fastest heavyweights. He might be the fastest heavyweight in the history of the sport. I don't think anybody moves like that guy does. At a 250 plus pound frame, his movement's extraordinary. And that's something you have to deal with. Like, that is a crazy ability. Like, his ability to move, like the way he moves, is so much different than everybody else in the sport. About the Curtis Blades fight was pretty quick. But how about the last one with the Pavlich fight where he won the interim title? That's a good one.
However, looking in another direction, after Joe's comments reached mainstream media, especially the ones surrounding the costly nature of this event, they started to garner a lot of attention for the very wrong reasons, as people began to question the authenticity of these claims, and how, if they really are true, then they might be a bit too demanding for any fighter, even if they are a legend like Jon Jones. Struck with these myriads of claims and skepticism, Joe recently came out and clarified his statements, emphasizing that even though he had personally heard about these comments and was part of a conversation where these figures were being discussed, after a lengthy conversation with Dana White, he is being informed that these claims are far from reality because the UFC has presented no such offer. Joe also ventured on other possibilities for Jones about how there are some confirmed statements that the vicious fighter might be thinking about finally retiring from the game based on his perception that he has given everything that he had to the sport, and at this point he has nothing else to achieve. Now, despite these new advancements and clearing his previous statements, Joe did express his apprehension regarding this decision made by Jones, because according to Rogan, even though this type of thing is personal to the fighter, they are still bound by some obligations that they can't just ignore, which in this case seems to be a fight between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall.
I mean, he's going to have to someday. He should. I'm not saying he should retire. I'm saying he should think about it. Give the man all the time he wants. He can fight whenever he wants to fight. That's Jon Jones. He's the GOAT. So leave him alone. If he decides one day to come back, and he comes back and he wants to fight Tom Aspinall for the heavyweight title, the question is, like, how long are you allowed to hold on to the title before they start having that conversation? Now, he just knocked out Stipe Miocic, so give the man months. Give the man 5 or 6 months. Just leave him the alone. But at a certain point in time, you have to decide who the heavyweight champion is. And if Tom is the interim heavyweight champion and Jon decides he doesn't want to fight anymore, he could do that. And he could do that also and then come back in a year and fight for the title. He could do that. He could do whatever he wants. But he might decide, you know what? Had an unbelievable career, never lost.
The main idea that Joe tried to highlight in this conversation seems to be the fact that regardless of the decisions made by Jones, one thing that he has to keep in mind is that he can't take too long in making this kind of decision, as people will start to speculate regarding the next heavyweight champion of the world. Adding on, Joe said that he has to make this choice very carefully, because if he decides to retire, then the belts will be taken away from him and Tom will be assigned as the next champion. But on the other hand, if Jon's intention is only to take a break for some time, then he has to make the choice public to stop the continuous speculation surrounding this matter.
How long are you allowed to hold on to the title before they start having that conversation? Now, he just knocked out Stipe Miocic, so give the man months. Give the man 5 or 6 months. Just leave him the alone. But at a certain point in time, you have to decide who the heavyweight champion is. And if Tom is the interim heavyweight champion and Jon decides he doesn't want to fight anymore, he could do that. And he could do that also and then come back in a year and fight for the title. He could do that. He could do whatever he wants. But he might decide, you know what? Had an unbelievable career, never lost.
Moving on, with the fight now a vivid possibility for this year, and the speculation regarding the money being answered by none other than Joe Rogan himself, many eminent figures in the industry have shared their takes on this fight and what will be the real amount that might be asked for it. Chael Sonnen, who is a well-renowned MMA analyst and a former professional fighter, thinks that even though Jon Jones is an exceptional figure in the MMA industry and deserves to have a good payday, the amount that he might be asking for, or the amount that Joe might have suggested in his comments, is a little too overboard for anyone, based on how, when you are in a business like MMA, you are bound by various different legalities and contractual measures that prevent you from shifting everything in accordance to your whims.
That ever came to him was $30 million. And they said, how much do you want? He said 20, 25, man, I want 30, make it 30 million. It was just like that. It was relaxed. It was the biggest number that popped into Jon's head. Okay. But we still now have a parameter, right? We have a legally binding contract, and now we have 30 million. Like, can you at least see where if 30 was the number for however it came up, even if it just spit out of somebody's mouth, if 30 is the number, you see where when you get to the meeting, the other side does not offer you 31.
Being someone who has been a part of this industry for quite some time now, Chael revealed that in matters like these, it is best if outsiders do not try to meddle, because even though they might be approaching this with good intentions, these types of factors are not possible in reality and might create a lot of unnecessary problems for the team that will participate in the said negotiations and will organize the fight.
It's a very hard spot, because you think, or Rogan thinks, that he's coming from a perspective of I'm looking out for the boys. I'm looking out for Jon Jones, and therefore I want to get him $30 million. In theory, that's not bad, but in reality, you now capped him. Jon Jones, per the contract that's signed, does not have a cap.
Changing the subject and looking at the fight in general, Chael commented on how despite the constant speculation surrounding this fight, this will be a tremendous affair, especially as the world will get to witness two very talented fighters step inside the ring for an extraordinary unification fight. During his take on this bout, the veteran fighter also addressed the numerous claims about this fight going in favor of Tom, and how the young fighter will be the one who will finally beat down the titan of the sport, stating that these are nothing but absurd statements issued by people who have no real knowledge of the sport, because no matter what you might have achieved or how talented you are, a challenge with a fighter like Jon Jones will ever be as easy as many people make it out to be.
And for what he did well, and that for the first time ever, somebody's spoken up and said, Jon can go with Tom. I have never even heard that. Everyone said Tom will crush him, Tom will go right through him, Jon will never do the fight, it's over in 1 minute the first time Tom touches him. I keep hearing these things, and I'm going, guys, could it be? Could that even be true, what you're describing? Could that even be true for a human being to be able to do that with somebody at this level?
Sharing his reason behind this take, Chael elaborated how in the sport of fighting, no matter what your characteristics and style or how much variation to might put into it, a fighter always tends to have a certain pattern that they instinctively follow throughout the fight, no matter who they might be up against. Looking for this factor in Tom, Chael added that even though the fighter possesses remarkable speed and vigor, his movements and little tricks seem to get a little predictable after some time, especially if you have closely observed the tapes of all his previous fights.
Tom has patterns. As fighters, we all have patterns. I have patterns. Everyone has patterns. It is up to the opponent and the opponent's team to study and find those patterns. And then he talked about Tom and how when Tom comes in, says sometimes he lunges, sometimes he jumps, sometimes he slides in. King talked about the fact that Tom can be very fluid, he can be very technical, he can also brawl. I mean, it was a good breakdown, it's very accurate.
While mentioning Jon's strong point, Chael claimed that the American fighter, despite his tremendous power and stamina, is also someone who has an impeccable boxing IQ and situational awareness, and is someone who keeps a very close eye on the fighting pattern that is being followed by his opponents by going through their past times multiple times in a single sitting, which not only allows him to get a sense of familiarity about the fighter in general, but it also gives him certain insights about the supposed strengths and weakness that his opponent might have.
He didn't say what those were, he said he has patterns. And if you were to take that and put that against Jon, Kane credited Jon as being the highest IQ'd, most intellectual fighter in the history of the sport. Talked about Jon Jones, like everybody, can break a fighter down and sit there and watch tapes, but Jon is a student. Jon will watch it over and over and over because he's looking for a pattern. And if he doesn't find the pattern, then he knows he missed it, he rewinds it, and he watches it again. This is Kane talking.
Sharing a different take regarding the ongoing drama around the fight, an eminent figure in the MMA community and a former champion in the sport, Daniel Cormier, stated that even though to many people the amount of $30 million for a single fight might sound a bit too pretentious, especially given the statistics behind it, the general public has to understand that like any other business in the world, there is a particular rule of supply and demand that applies to these these kinds of things, and the general perception is what rules the fight and the negotiations. Further elaborating on his analysis, Daniel stated that the main reason that Jon or his team might allegedly be asking for this insane sum is due to the fact that deep down they know the need and demand for this fight, which allows them to present their own requirements with a high possibility of them getting accepted based on how at this stage, with the pressure that UFC seems to be under for making this a reality, at the end they might be willing to give anything for it.
Jones had a stroke of genius by denying Aspinall from the jump because it drove demand through the roof. It's all supply and demand, right, guys? Everything's supply and demand. When someone wants something, you can charge more for it. Jones said, I ain't doing it. So then it made people go, I want this. I want this. And when you want something, especially you, the fan, because you drive everything. When you want something bad, the UFC tends to make it happen. Will it make it happen to the tune of 30 mil? I don't know. I wouldn't say that it would happen. But what I do know is that they will be far more willing to have the conversation.
Daniel then addressed the possibility of Jon Jones winning this fight and the massive effects that it might have on the entire sport in general. Expressing his analysis, Daniel stated that although Jon still has a massive upper hand when it comes to negotiations, if he wins this fight at his age against a much younger guy who is being championed as an unbeatable machine, and the next big thing, then Jones will be uplifted to the untouchable category where he will not only be the face of UFC in general, but he will also gain this superiority over all the future dealings in the sport.
So for all the times that everybody has said how horrible Jones is and he's stupid, he's an idiot, me being at the lead of this, very smart in the way that he's approached this, especially if he wins. Imagine if he wins. Imagine what happens to mixed martial arts if Jon Jones beats Tom Aspinall after Tom Aspinall being the guy that everybody thought could beat him. After Tom Aspinall doing what he's done to the heavyweight division. Imagine if he wins. Imagine the position he will find himself in terms of negotiating power then.
Talking about the future of UFC, the former champion made a rather distinct comment on how to pursue the ongoing narrative of UFC and major stakeholders about making Tom this new major player in the sport under the very likely possibility that they might be losing Jones after this fight due to the countless hints at possible retirement. They first have to make sure that there are no chances that Jon wins this thing and then chooses to retire. Because in that case, no matter how much glory that Tom might get in his career, he will always be burdened by this defeat through the hands of one of the most gifted and talented fighters in the history of MMA.
For the company, for the UFC to move forward without Jon Jones after all this time, this guy has been through 3 generations of fighters. For them to move forward without Jon Jones, they need him to lose. He needs to lose. He can't go and leave this thing undefeated. For it to work, for Tom Aspinall to come out like this big, shiny new thing, to be the next big superstar, he has to beat Jon Jones. Because if Jones beats him or if Jon just walks away, no matter what Tom Aspinall does, there will always be that cloud that hangs over him. Well, you didn't beat Jon Jones.
So in the end, what do you guys think about this fight between these 2 heavyweight fighters? Who do you believe might win in this fight? Would it be the reigning king of the sport who will preserve one again? Or do you think it might be the time that he gets overthrown by a young, aspiring fighter who has a lot to prove? And along with all these factors, what are your thoughts on the insane amount of money that might be involved in this event? Make sure to tell us about your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe to our channel.